Welcome everyone to another excellent webinar from the Quasi-Experimental Methods Group of the Global Observatory of Long-Term Care. I'm Adelina Comas-Herrera, and it's my pleasure to introduce today's webinar. I'm going to give you a 5-minute presentation on what's the Global Observatory of Long-Term Care, and also to let you know about the next webinars after this one. Now, the Global Observatory of Long-Term Care is a platform for cross-national learning to improve and strengthen care systems, and it's part of the International Long-Term Care Policy Network. And our aim is to share evidence on the key challenges facing long-term care systems, showcase how different countries and localities are addressing them, and we want to share research evidence, facilitate collaborations, and have good discussions. It is aimed at everybody, from policymakers, industry advocates, care professionals, and academics. And the way it works is that it's powered by people's willingness to share their work. And the way we do this is through some GOLTC publications where we have long-term care system profiles, we have some blogs, and we have some really excellent methods guides that we'll tell you a bit more about later. And we're developing topic guides. And the real motor of the observatory are the interest groups, and they are self-organized. They organize their own webinars and share relevant publications and resources in each of their pages. We now have 23 interest groups, very diverse, and we're really, really happy to host them. And you'll see when I tell you about the webinar, just the variety of topics that we're covering on long-term care. We also have a big database that we're gradually developing, and this contains at the moment 572 experts on long-term care listed by country, topics, and methods. We have gradually also a database on publications on long-term care. It's pretty good, covering research of the last couple of years, particularly, and everything again is stacked by country, topics, and methods. We're building a research project database, and we're also now developing a really good library of videos of webinars that you can search and find out. And we will be sharing a video of today's webinar as well with the slides. And just to tell you about our future events, the next one is next week on the 3rd of June. Very different than today. It's on community health interventions through music engagement for perinatal mental health. We have another one on pain assessments in care homes, looking at intelligent methods. That's on the 10th of June, and on the 12th, we'll be looking at integrated long-term care. This is a joint webinar with the International Federation of Integrated Care, and it will be covering 3 very big European projects on integrated long-term care. Then on the 20th of June, we have a webinar of the care and social protection in Southern Africa interest group, looking at elder care, disabilities, and social protection. And we'll be adding more dates and more webinars soon, but for now, I'm really happy to introduce today's webinar. I'm going to hand over to Javiera, who leads the Quasi-Experimental Methods Group, and really grateful to Maria Petrillo for joining us for today's presentation.
Thank you, Adelina. I'm going to share a few slides now. Yes, so for those that haven't been in any of these quasi-experimental method interest group webinars before, well, the main motivation of the cluster is to bring together academic policymakers and practitioners. And by the name of or the title of the group, you will assume that it's strongly methodological and quite technical, but at the same time, that doesn't exclude anyone. We always try to make everything understandable for people that may not be so embedded in these kind of technicalities. But the most important thing is that we believe that method matters and they can have a real impact on long-term care. So our main aim is to provide a platform for knowledge exchange and generating new methodological ideas. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is to enhance the quality of research in the area of long-term care. So everyone is welcome. The steering group members are Bram, who is in Erasmus University of Rotterdam, Joaquin, who is at LSE in the Department of Social Policy, and myself, Javiera, who is at the Care Policy and Evaluation Center, CPEC. And I always like to show a bit of a stats of how we are growing as a group. So we have 93 members, so we are double since the last webinar. There are expertise for more than 40 countries and regions, 27 countries, but then when we extend to regions, it becomes more than 40. And also in terms of who attends to webinars and who is part of the cluster, we have also double, as I said. In terms of researchers, we have 88 researchers, 3 people that they are from the policy side, and 2 people that are from an advocacy role. So really good, and if you can keep encouraging colleagues or people that you know to join the interest group. So if you want to join the interest group, you can go to the Global Observatory of Long-Term Care and find them, and then complete the small short form, and then you will be part of the team. So, and as Adelina was saying, we have developed some topic guides which focus on some methods and how they can be applied to long-term care. So we have things on propensity score matching, regression discontinuity design, and instrumental variables. And there are more to come, but they all have been developed in mind that maybe not everyone will be very technical, but also to give examples how these methods have been used in this area of research. That's it, I think. And Maria, if you want to start, and you want to introduce yourself, I think you will probably introduce yourself better.
Yes, I will just first share my slides. So, hi everyone, and thanks so much for having me today. I'm Maria Petrillo. I'm part of the University of Sheffield, part of the SRC Centre for Care. And today I'm going to talk about a joint project with University of Sheffield, Birmingham, and Oxford, all part of the SRC Centre for Care, titled Estimating the Cost of Informal Care with a Novel Two-Stage Approach to Individual Synthetic Control. So, our study has 3 main aims. The first is to provide the first robust causal estimation of caregiving income penalty in the UK. The second is to analyze the relationship between the intensity of care provided and the magnitude of the caregiving income penalty. The third one is to analyze a little bit the heterogeneity in the caregiving income penalty, and so to explore intersectional inequality by age, sex, and ethnicity. To achieve this, we developed a new approach to the individual synthetic control method that enhanced the estimation accuracy, in particular in large sample. So, unpaid carers provide the majority of care for family members, friends, and neighbors facing challenge due to older age, long-term illness, or disability. Now, according to the latest census, 5 million people in England and Wales, more than 627,000 people in Scotland, and more than 164,000 people in Northern Ireland provide unpaid care every day, valued at 184 billion, which is almost equivalent to the combined NHS budget across the 4 nations. The support carers provide often has significant implications for their financial well-being, health well-being, relationship well-being. In this paper in particular, we focused on the financial side, so on the financial well-being. Balancing paid work with caring responsibility often leads to reduced productivity, declining work performance, fewer working hours, and various opportunity costs, which negatively impact on caregiving income. Many occupations require fixed work schedule, which by definition are incompatible with the unpredictable nature of unpaid care, and flexible work schedule or arrangement are very hard to secure. So this leaves many unpaid carers to have no option but to reduce working hours or to leave the labor market altogether. Wage discrimination against unpaid carers is also another compounding element and another compounding challenge that undermine their professional engagement, motivation, or financial stability. Now, the challenge faced by unpaid carers are also compounded by demographic shift. The UK's population age 85 plus is projected to double by 2045, while working age population will grow of 5% until 2035 and then flatline. This demographic shift will place even more pressure on the already strained social care system. Rising unmet needs, financial instability in care provision, workforce shortage, these highlight the stress and the fragility of the system. There is also an overall concern for labor market supply point of view, as given that the population is aging over time, many other unpaid carers will need to leave employment to provide unpaid care, and this is going to exacerbate the labor market shortage. So this is a summary of the motivation that pushed us to, try to answer this research question. Is there an unpaid caregiving income penalty? So, in order to do so, we developed this new methodology called the individual synthetic control approach. Now, methodologically, the key challenge is determining what would have happened to unpaid care if they had not taken on unpaid care responsibility. This is the challenge to understand if there is a caregiving income penalty. Now, this alternative reality, this alternative universe is unobservable, but we can approximate it by constructing a synthetic version of unpaid carers. So a weighted combination of non-carers with identical characteristics, which will mimic what would have happened to unpaid carers had they not taken on unpaid care responsibilities. We call this synthetic control the doppelganger. This doppelganger serves as a customized control group, enabling more precise comparison and better estimates of the true impact of caregiving. Now, our empirical strategy to estimate the caregiving income penalty builds on established techniques that have been used in the literature to estimate the average treatment effect on the treated, especially in case of disaggregated data. Now, traditionally, the technique that have been preferred in the literature are the matching technique or the difference in difference technique. Now, in this paper, we argue that individual synthetic control can lead to better estimate, and the reasons are very simple. In terms of matching, the validity of matching relies on two critical assumptions. The first one is that all the factors that are influencing the likelihood of receiving the treatment and so becoming an unpaid care are accounted for in the measured characteristics. And second, it really depends on the quality of the matching. If those conditions are violated, then the matching estimator may be biased. Now, those are issues that the individual synthetic control is designed to address. And we will see how, because there is a constraint in the internal minimization problem that acts as an internal regularization process. Matching estimator also provide usually an unweighted average of the untreated group, while the individual synthetic control provides the weighted average that fits better in terms of pre-intervention trend. In terms of difference in difference, we know that the difference in difference relies on the common trend assumption. So the credibility of this method falls when the pre-treatment trend or the characteristic in general of the untreated units differ significantly from those of the treated units. Now, the individual synthetic control doesn't have this constraint. Sadly, the individual synthetic control comes with some disadvantage, which is notorious computationally expensive, but also in case of large donor size, it can lead to interpolation bias. And I will try to explain how we try to avoid this bias, how we try to overcome this limitation. Now, just to give you a little bit of a framework of where the individual synthetic control comes from, well, the individual synthetic control comes from the synthetic control approach that was first proposed by Abadi in 2003 and 2010. The synthetic control method uses a weighted combination of potential control units that act as a counterfactual. In other words, it produces a doppelganger for the only one treated unit, which is made out of weighted combination of untreated units. So formally, that's very simple to see. We have W, which is a vector of potential weight. We have X1, which is a vector of pretreatment value for the treated unit. And then we have X0, which is a matrix of pre-treatment value for the control unit. Now, what we want to do is to solve equation 1, which is our minimization problem. And what we want to find is the vector W, which allow us to minimize what is in equation 1. So a vector that will try to minimize the difference between X1 and X0 once applied to X0. Once we have the weight, we can plug this weight into equation 2, and we find basically the average treatment effect on the treated. Now, in 2021, Van and Breen published a paper on using the individual synthetic control method for the first time in case of disaggregated data. So in the case in which is not only one treated unit, but different treated unit. And this is very simple, is expressed in equation 3, where we have multiple treated units going from 1 to L. Now, as I was saying before, one of the disadvantage of the individual synthetic control is that it's really computationally expensive, especially in case of large donor pool size. This can also lead to interpolation bias. So we propose a modification to the individual synthetic control. We propose to find the K nearest control unit using, in the first step of our calculation, a nearest neighbor matching approach, so that we reduce the number of control units for computing the weights in the individual synthetic control approach. Just to summarize, our estimation, our model relies on 5 different steps. The first is data cleaning. We want to identify the control and the treated units. The second is called donor measurement points matching. So for every single treated cases, so for every single unpaid care, donors are selected based on the availability of identical measurement point. Bear in mind that donor can be reused across multiple treated cases. Then we have the third stage, which is the time reindex. So once we have identified the donor with the same measurement points, we reindex the time in a way that year 0 represents the years of the treatment. Finally, we have stage 4, which is the donor's nearest neighbor matching. So once we have all the donor well reindexed, we're gonna select only those who are close to the close to the treatment in the covariate space using a nearest neighbor approach. Once we have this small panel of donors that are close enough in terms of covariate space to the treated unit, we run our individual synthetic control. Now, after this boring presentation about the methods, I will go into the data. And for this analysis, we use the UK Household Longitudinal Study. As all of you will know already, is a large-scale, nationally representative study that follows individual and household across the UK over time. Now, the reason why this data set is very important to us is that it provides us with 2 very important information. The first, it allows us to have insight into the carer status. So it allows us to understand if individuals are providing unpaid care or special assistance to sick, disabled, or adult. And the second information that it provides instead is the intensity of care provided, which is measured in the data by the weekly hours of care provided. This allows us to take in consideration different treatment groups. So we have different subsamples of the treatment group, while the treatment group are unpaid carers. And we distinguish unpaid carers in 4 different categories. We have high intensity carers, those providing 50 hours or more per week of care. Medium high intensity unpaid carers, those providing from 20 to 49 hours per week of care. Medium low intensity unpaid carers, those providing 5 to 19 hours per week of care. And low intensity unpaid carers, those providing less than 5 hours per week. This will allow us to understand if there is any threshold effect when the intensity comes into play. The control group instead are those who never provide care throughout the lifespan of our panel. Now, our outcome variables is income. Now, we can think of income in all different ways, many different ways, but our conceptualization on income in this paper is threefold. We have individual income, so the total monthly labor income gross, the household income, and the income share. So how much we contribute with our individual income to the household income. We also ensure that we adjust the model in order to compare like for like. And so we take in consideration background characteristics, for example, age, gender, relationship status, as well as household size and so on, education level, and ethnicity. Now, those are just some descriptive statistics. For time concern, I would like to focus on panel C, which I think is the most interesting graph to analyze here. And in particular, panel C represent the relationship between individual monthly income and age, segmented by care intensity. The x-axis represent the age, while the y-axis represent the monthly income. Different color line represent different care intensity, where the black one is actually our control, so those who never provide unpaid care. As you can see, across all age groups, individuals who provide unpaid care earn less than the control group, the black line. And the difference is particularly relevant when we consider the green and red line. Those providing 50 plus hours of care, so the red line, experience the largest income penalty with significantly lower earnings throughout their working lives. Now, in this table, I just want to show the main characteristic of those 5 groups. And basically, we have different columns for different intensity and also for the control groups. We have analyzed more, but I just wanted to report that those main ones, because I think the difference is really staggering. So the likelihood of being employed, for example, increase as the intensity of care provided per week decreases. So we have 58% for low intensity carers in the likelihood of being employed against the 25% for high intensity carers. A similar trend is also shown by income share, which is again how much I participate with my personal income, my individual income to the household income. Now, low intensity carers contribute to nearly 28% to the household income, while high intensity carers contribute only to 10%. Also, what you can see is that unpaid carers are more likely to be married, as expected also by the literature. And high intensity caring is predominantly shouldered and provided by women. We have 64% of women in our sample of high intensity carers. So let me give you straight away the result that we achieve in this paper. High intensity carer lose almost £200 a month in the 4th year after taking on unpaid care responsibilities. And let me show you how. So this is the main result of our paper. And in here, you can see basically the difference between the average individual income for high intensity carers compared to the average individual income of their doppelganger over time. Now, the red dashed line marks the onset of becoming an unpaid carer. This is our year 0. Now, on the left-hand side, you can see blue bar and blue marker. They represent, again, the difference between individual income of unpaid carers and individual incomes of those not providing care prior to the uptake of unpaid care responsibilities. And as you can see, the blue bar, so the confidence interval, always touch the 0. This means that there is no statistically significant difference in personal income between unpaid carers, high-intensity unpaid carers, as their doppelganger prior to the uptake of unpaid care responsibilities. You can appreciate now how much the situation changed after year 0. In fact, taking on unpaid care responsibility significantly affect income trajectories. High-intensity carer experience a widening negative income gap after taking on unpaid care responsibility. And this leads to a decline in income of £166 in year 2, up to £192 in year 4. Now, we have tried to analyze this, as I said, for different caring intensity. And here, this graph is the complete panel, in which you can see in panel A, high-intensity carers, in panel B, medium high-intensity carers, in panel C, medium low-intensity carers, panel D, low-intensity. As you can see, no matter the intensity of care provided, prior to the uptake of unpaid care responsibilities, the blue bar always touch the 0, meaning that there is no statistically significant difference between unpaid carers and their doppelganger. However, the situation always changes after the uptake of unpaid care responsibilities, and every single group here reports an income penalty. Now, is also very, very significant how there is a substantial threshold effect. With higher intensity carers experience greater income penalty. We then focus on the income share, and so what we see is that building on the earlier discussion about the decline in personal income, let's focus only for time concern. I'm very happy to answer any question later, but let's focus on panel A, high intensity carers. We can see that following the decrease in individual income, we can see that there is also a reduction in the contribution with the personal income to the household income, and so a reduction in income share, which stand at approximately 4.8% in year 2 and 4.9% in year 4. We then analyze household income. Let's focus on, again, panel E. And as you can see, there is that we have a decrease of £100 and £324 per month in the second and fourth year for high intensity carers. Now, you can see that in this instance, for example, let's always focus on the panel E. The very first bar, so in year 1, 2, in year 1 and 2, they touch the zero. We explain this not significance in the result as a possible compensating mechanism that could occur in the household. So somehow the household try to adjust the financial dynamics within the household itself. So for example, this could include redistributing financial responsibility, adjusting the expenditure patterns, finding alternative source of income. As you can see, this compensating mechanism, they just hold for a little while, but then even the household income do face a huge shock, a huge decrease. This table just summarized the magnitude of the penalty. In this case, we compute the relative penalty to take in consideration also of the income that were earned prior to the uptake of unpaid care responsibilities. And you can see that there is actually a big difference between these different 4 groups. We have that high intensity carer show a relative income penalty of 45%, while this goes down to 22% for medium high intensity, going down to 13% for medium low intensity, going down to 4% for low intensity carers. The next step in this paper that we take is to explore a little bit intersectional inequalities and heterogeneities in the caregiving income penalty. And in particular, we do this for sex, ethnicity, and age range. Now, for time concern, I'm not going to show the ethnicity. Very happy to answer any question related to this, but I'm going to focus on sex and age range. So those are the results for the study and the analysis that compares women and men. So replicate the same exercise, one time for women, one time for men. As you can see on the left-hand side, panel A and C, we have individual income for high-intensity female and low-intensity female. While on the right-hand side, we have panel B and D, which replicate the analysis on the individual income for male of high intensity and male of low intensity. Now, bear in mind, due to data constraint, we can only identify 2 groups in terms of intensity. Low intensity carers, less than 20 hours of care. High intensity carers, more than 20 hours of care per week. Unfortunately, we are not able to slice and dice the data, forming the 4 categories as before, but I think it's quite useful anyway to see this difference. And let me report the result in this slide. Here you can see that both women and men experience income loss after becoming an unpaid carers. However, the relative individual caring penalties reveal significant disparities between men and women, and especially across intensity level. Women face a higher individual income penalty for high intensity caring compared to men. It's 30% versus the 25%. Low intensity caring role, men experience a slightly higher penalty compared to women. As I said before, we do the same exercise, this time taking in consideration the age. And in particular, we divide on the left-hand side, you can see here individual aged under 25, which we can classify as young carers. In the middle, we have the working age population, so 25 to 64. And then on the right-hand side, we have result for over 65. Again, because of restriction due to data, we again classify unpaid care only in low intensity, less than 20 hours of care, and more higher intensity for more than 20 hours of care. What you can see, especially seeing, young carers, so panel A and D, you can see the young carers face the most substantial income reduction, with a penalty that is reaching as much as £502 per month compared to their doppelganger. We also observe a decrease for individual income for high-intensity carers aged 25-64. By the fifth year of caring, for example, they experience a £170 per month reduction in income. This decrease is also, a big decrease, even if less severe than what experienced by young carers. In contrast, as expected, we observed no significant caring penalty for individual age 65 and older. And this is mainly due because the income variable that we have mainly take in consideration labor market income. And so it's quite expected, our result. Again, to summarize, we provide here a table where young carers show a significant caregiving, relative caregiving penalty of 181 relative penalty. This is 17% for those people aged 26-64. So I'm not going to show these results as well, but I'm just going to have a quick talk about those. In order to validate our result, we conduct different robustness check. The first thing that we do is to replicate this exercise with different estimators. And in particular, we provide analysis using the propensity score matching, difference in difference approach, and the synthetic difference in difference approach, highlighting the difference with our result, and testing those estimators for their reliability. The second test is about data contiguity, mainly following the paper by Abadi. We know that we need a minimum amount of data point prior to the estimation in order for the individual synthetic control to achieve reliable results. So when we run our baseline model, we take in consideration a sample of treated cases for which we have at least 3 data points prior to the treatment. Now we want to challenge this assumption, and we redo our result, we rerun our analysis, taking in consideration 3 continuous data points prior to the uptake of unpaid care responsibilities and 5 continuous data points prior to the uptake of unpaid care responsibilities. We then take in consideration the length of care episode. Mainly in our baseline model, we are not really concerned about how many data points we have that unpaid care provide care for. So it can even be just a single episode, or it can be like a lifetime. We really do not take this in consideration. As soon as they provide unpaid care in one single data point, we consider them unpaid carers. We want to challenge this, and so we take in consideration in our robustness test also the length of the care episode, taking in consideration those individual unpaid carers who provide unpaid care for 3 continuous years and 5 continuous years. And then we run different placebo tests in a Monte Carlo simulation style, which confirm the credibility of our result. So to conclude, we are aiming here in this paper to answer 3 main research questions. The first one is, do unpaid caring responsibility have an impact, a causal impact on the income of unpaid carers? Well, yes, we notice that there is a shift that occurs after year 0, after the uptake of unpaid care responsibilities. The second question is there a relationship between number of hours of care provided and the magnitude of the caregiving income penalty? Well, yes, there is. The magnitude of the penalty increase as the hours per week invested in caring activities increases. The third question is, what about the heterogeneity? What about does the income penalty varies according to sex, age, ethnicity? Well, yes, the financial impact of caring is higher for women rather than men, and young carers do face the most substantial income reduction, with penalty reaching as much as £502 per month when compared to their doppelganger. And I think I will stop here. Hopefully, I'm just on time, but I'm very happy to answer any question.
Yeah, firstly, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation and this paper. I found it really interesting to go through, and I was familiar with propensity score matching and D&D analysis previously, but this was really a very inspiring paper just to see how far methods can go. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much.
So my first kind of question actually does relate to the method, and then I will go towards the data. So I was kind of thinking, because I'm very familiar with the traditional methods, and I was just kind of wondering how this two-stage individual synthetic control approach is, how much better is it? Is there a trade-off between this computational efficiency that you report here and the model accuracy?
So basically, we do run the analysis without the first stage and with the first stage. The result achieved are basically the same, but the computational time is half of the half of the half. So it's far way quicker. It takes in consideration only individual who in the covariate space are actually close to you, meaning that we are actually comparing people who are similar. Because if we want to compare a treated with the untreated individual, like the donor pool is very big, and you can even ending up comparing very different people and then adding up the computational time, computing weight for these people who are really far away from you. So we see that as being, that is all in the paper. You will be able to read about the computational tractability and all the tests that we have been doing so far on this.
Yeah, I think that's really amazing to see, because I've been going through propensity score matching myself, and that takes so much time and so many factors.
And also, is the propensity score matching does have many limitations, and we try to address those. So yeah, I think it's well, maybe I'm biased myself.
I'm curious to try it out, so maybe I'll report back to you. My other question was actually regarding to the data source you used, the survey panel data. And do you think there was any potential bias introduced there due to the attrition or perhaps even the self-reporting with regards to income?
Well, of course there is. And, we know the limitation of this survey. There is also limitation in terms of self-identification of unpaid carers, because many unpaid carers do not realize they are unpaid carers. There is attrition in terms of income. We can only do our best with the data available, I think.
Because in my research, I use a lot of administrative registry data. So I'm kind of wondering, how would you think this method would actually apply to more administrative register research?
We really wanted to do that, but since this is the very first time that we do this kind of approach, we needed to build the library. So the code that we used, the one that we created, are available on GitHub for everyone to use now. We needed something that we could accept faster when we go into administrative data, because it's via SafePod and all this nightmare. The software are quite slow. And when I inquired with the UK HLS as well to use secure data of the UK HLS, they didn't allow me to run the analysis on the supercomputer, and this would have slow ads down. But now that we know the inside out of this methodology, we really want to replicate these, and especially what we want to do is to do something more about education titles and education achievement of young carers. So yeah, it's this project took us 3 years, so we are now trying to build up on the paper and try to answer many more questions.
Really look forward to seeing the next steps, because this was really a huge achievement.
Thank you so much.
But the other part of actually, which is what I had considered one of the most interesting and jarring findings, was the implications for the younger carers. And I was wondering if you or your colleagues actually discussed about if there was any social policies that could be introduced that could actually be used to mitigate these long-term effects that younger carers would encounter for their income
Yeah,
potential.
well, of course, we want to study more what's going on here. We are reporting a very raw result. We really want to understand why this is happening. We have a very um, an idea because I think young carers do face the highest cost opportunity here. They are sacrificing training, they are sacrificing chances of starting and on the job market, of education itself. I think what we discuss is also how the Care Act at the moment does not entitle people in full-time education to claim for benefit, and this is a huge limitation for young carers who are not supported. But yes, I'm not really a policymaker, so what I know is something must be done.
Yeah. I was actually at a seminar this morning and they were discussing how the UK introduced flexible work time. And that's probably something that you could actually add into your model to consider how that has implications or could have mitigated some of the loss.
Yeah, we have extraordinary example even outside the UK. There are other countries, for example, that have paid care leaves, which could help us to understand whether this policy is mitigating the effect. We are now trying to understand our next steps. One of the next step is also do a cross-country comparison to understand whether countries that have different policy of support could actually teach us something in terms of policy implication. But yes, definitely is something that is worth exploring.
Well, I'm in Sweden, so if you are interested, I'm open for a discussion.
Oh yeah.
Megan and Maria, there is a question from Enrico.
Oh, hi Enrico.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yes, thank you, Maria, for this very fantastic and very clear presentation. It's a really interesting method, and I'm looking forward to hear more about. My question relates to how how you measured the hours of care. I know they're self-reported, but what I was wondering was whether you took the hours from the first observation when care was observed, or whether when they had several periods in which they reported care, whether you actually used the average of their care hours reported.
So what we did is we wanted to capitalize on the shock of uptake on paid care responsibilities. So we take the first year in which they report providing unpaid care, because 50 hours of care, it's a shock on the income, and we wanted to capitalize on that. Of course, there are different ways. You could take the average hour of care provided. You can take in the middle point, you can take the median, the mode. But what we did is to capitalize on the first year in which they become unpaid care.
Thank you.
This answered
Thank you,
the
Maria.
question? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much, Maria.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think there is a question from Brian and Adelina. I also have a question, but I will leave it at the end, but I think Brian is first.
This was really fascinating. Thank you for sharing this really exciting way of trying to investigate this. I have a few questions that are all really about wrapping my head around how we actually interpret your findings and hopefully can give some food for thought on ways of looking at the analysis through a different lens and extracting better policy messages. But first, I sort of want to get a little bit more information on how you measured income and how you assessed employment, which I saw was one of the that's part of this kind of the matching or the creation of the doppelganger. Can you just briefly explain those two to me quickly?
Yeah, so first of all, the baseline result that we have is for the entire population, employed and unemployed, just because we didn't want to fall into the selection bias problem. But we do provide other tests on whether we consider only employed unemployed people. So we do have this in our main paper. I didn't show it today just for time concern. Employed, we double check the variable of whether they declare themselves to be employed, but also the wage that they have at the time. And we build our variable that aims at solving the problem of, wrong answer, missing values. So we try to take in consideration the wage, the income that they have. So we take in consideration different variables to understand whether they are employed or not. In terms of income that we consider, I think the definition that the UK HLS provides is total monthly labor income gross. So this is we do investigate more in the paper, but to be really honest, I don't remember now the exact wording in the Understanding Society regarding this variable.
So
This
that means that the income you're assessing does not include any income from benefits or from pensions.
It shouldn't. We do
Okay.
have something in the note. I remember writing that down, but to be honest, now on the top of my head, I don't remember, but it shouldn't. No.
Okay. And so one of my other questions was sort of querying why you didn't include any kind of health measure to create your doppelgangers, because that's really important here. And it ties back to sort of a clarification I'm still seeking about employment, because if you're if I would argue that employment or inactivity should be part of the matching for the doppelganger. But do you assess that in the measurement before becoming a carer, or do you assess that in some time period after becoming a carer? How can you incorporate the sort of time variant nature of labor market status there?
So my fault. Background characteristics here are just a very small list of what we actually consider. Employment is taken in consideration for our matching. So we do take in consideration whether a person is employed or unemployed. In terms of health, I don't think this is in our background characteristic. And the reason is that we started with a very large sample of individual characteristics we were accounting for, and then we were reducing the size of the characteristic when we saw that there was no variation in the way the individual synthetic control was built, in order to reduce the time for the computational time. So I need to go back to my notes. It has been a project of 3 years, I will be honest. But I do remember that we did consider health, and it was one of these variables that was not modifying the way in which the individual synthetic control was computing the weights. But I will be happy to come back to you with a little bit more insight into this question, because I really struggled to remembering. But in the background characteristic, we do account for employment. We do account, for example, for household size. There is gender, relationship status, sex. I think this is the complete list. Of course, education level and ethnicity.
And sorry, final question. In the time periods after becoming the caregiver that you've assessed, are you ensuring that people remain caregivers through that whole time? Or if people are caregivers for 2 years, do they then stop being analyzed in year 3?
So this is a very interesting question. So on the top of my head, I think once a person is considered unpaid carers, is always an unpaid carers. And this because we want to understand what happens to their income after. Because no matter how long, they do have long run effect. So we want to track them over time. And that's why you can see 6 years after. We want to understand the dynamics, even when they are not unpaid carers, and then to provide more of an estimation on those who provide continuous unpaid care. We include a robustness check, taking consideration whether they provide 3 years or 5 years, so that we can disentangle a little bit the effect, and the effect does vary a lot if they provide 3 years or 5 years of care.
Okay, interesting.
I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, you answered them great. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks.
I think it's my turn. A fantastic paper, thank you. And it's really important to build the evidence on the importance of intensity of care. So and I'm delighted to see such a robust and new method. I wanted to raise 2 points. One is that we know from other studies that there is inequalities in terms of who become care. Often, well, what might happen is if you have a number of siblings, it will be the one that has the lower earnings who ends up becoming the carer, as it's seen as having a lower opportunity cost. And that means that the existing inequalities are amplified. Now, I understand that the way you're doing it, you're not really able to observe this, but I was wondering whether with the methods you're using, whether you might also be able to do a bit of a prediction, so looking further back in terms of who becomes a carer. And I'll give you and I have a second question. Maybe I'll let you answer the first. Yeah.
Oh, yes. So, yes, of course, this is an aspect that I think is very fascinating and we want to explore in detail more. So the only thing what we did to take this into account is to consider the family structure, meaning that we expect a different setting when there are 3 people or 4 people or 5 people in the way a person could be impacted by providing unpaid care characteristics. But surely one of the plans that we have is to understand what is the factors that impact more, the characteristics that impact more on the uptaking of unpaid care characteristics. So we have a paper actually that we are working on using longitudinal study data, just because we need a bigger sample, and we are analyzing now. We are still playing around with the technique. We are trying to implement a random forest or tree approach to understand the ranking of the covariate and how they actually impact on the likelihood of providing unpaid care, taking in consideration different elements like education, ethnicity, or age, sex. So yeah, this is a work in progress. We still don't know if it's going to be with this technique. I think with this technique, what we can do is to provide a little bit of a framework of what happened with different family structure in terms of household size, but we cannot push further than that, I'm afraid, I think, with these exact methods. But yeah.
Excellent. I'm very happy you're looking at this. And the second comment I had is linked to Brian's is there's the work of Skira that showed that when the caring episode ended, people faced quite important penalties due to labor market frictions when they were trying to return to work. And I also think that this technique could be really useful to look at that in detail as well. But yeah, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yes, this was one of the research questions that I wanted to answer. My only concern is that I need to have data on a very long period to understand whether the caring episode is stopping just for some years, or whether it's a long-term kind of effect, where they are not unpaid carers for good. And that is something that we really need to plan carefully in order to actually track down that particular impact. But yeah, it's worth. There is so much that we want to explore, because at the end of the day, you are interested in knowing what happens to pension, what happens to asset, what happens to tax contribution. It's what is nice but exciting, but at the same time shocking of this literature is that there is so much to still do, and yeah, we are excited to keep going and see.
There is a question in the chat, maybe related to what Brian was asking, whether you are able to consider intermittent caregiving. I guess it's people that stop being a carer and then come back to be a carer, and is on and off their care responsibility.
I think it's something we can do, because at least for this, if we can see whether a person is intermittent, I think it's more complicated if you want to see whether they are not providing ever again unpaid carers, because you need a bigger data set. So you need to understand whether the person they care for, what happens to that. But yeah, in terms of intermittent caregiver, is something that is worth exploring. We needed to set a line on when to stop on this paper, because at some point it was becoming a book. So we needed to say, okay, this is for next piece of paper or next research question. But yeah, it's an interesting question. Yeah.
I have one kind of boring question, and it's about how you choose the variables to do the first matching. When you use the donors, how do you decide what variables to use to do the matching?
Well, we take in consideration especially what could impact on our main outcome variable, which is income. So we take in consideration it's a really clear matching. So you need to take in account all the variable that could potentially impact on your outcome variable to make the group as similar as possible. Now, again, I don't have the list on the top of my head. I should have put it in the slide so I could answer properly. But in the paper, there is a very big description of how we select those variables and which variable we selected. So you will find it there. But I'm very happy to, send over an email to give you more details.
Thank you very much. I have put on the chat for those that ask the link to the paper, the unpublished version. That I know.
Yeah, we are updating the one that is online at the moment because we insert different other tests. So I will provide you with the updated link. But yeah, because at the moment is in review. So
sure. And there is, I think, last question of this very engaged conversation. Last question, Lydia. Half a minute for question, half a minute for the answer.
Super short. Thank you so much for the presentation. So building on the last question on the understanding of informal care, whether it's part of like an intermittent episode or a longer episode, I was wondering if you have information or you've explored the health conditions of the care recipient, and if that could give you some information on whether they will need care in the future or not, or what are the needs of the care recipient.
No, we didn't investigate in the health condition of the care recipient. I'm not sure whether UK HLS will help in these regards, but is something, of course, that will be beneficial. Yeah, in terms of intermittent and not intermittent, what we did is only baseline, one episode, different tests for more continuous carers. But yeah, I didn't explore the health condition. I think this is a very good, as Brian was suggesting as well, I think it's something we could take in consideration. I think we did discuss this at the very beginning of our paper again, and I think it was just I don't remember if it was missing value from the UK HLS side or whether it was something to do with not much difference in individual synthetic control and trying to minimize the computational time. But yeah, I will need to check it out again. Thank you, Lydia.
And thank you very much, Maria and Mega. It was a very extraordinary presentation. I was very animated after lunchtime. People will not fall asleep after this. Thank you very much, both of you, and Adelina and everyone who participated.
Thank you so much for having me and for all the questions. It was really, really engaging.
Thank you.